So just talk amongst yourself until we get this thing going.
Cool. Exactly. You looking at Milan's comment?
Yes.
What's he saying?
Not sure why I tuned in. It's so not in Yellowstone. Like, that's okay. I'm ready for that.
Hey, everybody. Sean Dotson here with The Flip Side. I want to welcome you all to the non-PC beer drinking, thrill of the chase talking show, The Flip Side. And tonight I'm enjoying an elevated IPA from La Cumbra Brewery out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I'm going to pop a top, and hopefully you all have your beverages of choice and are ready for a great show tonight. So as I pour this, we all know that this is the Flip the Script show. This is when the guest becomes the host and they get to choose the topic, and we go down that rabbit hole together. So tonight, my guest host is Alan Kelly, and I'm going to now pass the con over to Alan, and he's going to tell us about his topic, and we're all going to go down this rabbit hole together. So Alan Kelly, you got the con.
All right. A little scared here. I mean, the comments are already telling me it's not in Yellowstone. So that's a little scary, but that's cool. So yeah, I'm just here to share my thoughts and ideas on why the treasure might be in Yellowstone. I'm not 100% sure. No one can be sure. And I'm also going to qualify that a lot of my commentary is about the greater Yellowstone area, which could include areas like Hebgen Lake and things like that. So it's not just inside the proper boundaries of Yellowstone. It's all the references that Forrest makes to Yellowstone and his trips to Yellowstone. So that's one call out. And then number two, I just invited Cynthia here because one, she's awesome. I was just telling her, and I even have told Forrest that she's my spirit animal of the chase, or my totem of the chase. So
what animal would that be, Alan?
Watch it.
Would it be a bear? Would it be a bear naked lady?
I'm not sure. There's a buffalo back there, so we'll see.
Be nice.
Yeah.
So tell us what that sign is behind you really quick, Cynthia.
The sign says Wyoming.
Can you tell me
A place your feet may leave, but your heart will always be. On my monitor is backwards, so.
Right. Got to read it backwards.
I cannot.
Very nice. Very cool sign. We were talking about that earlier. I really like it.
Yeah. So it's an honor to have Cynthia here with me as my guest host. She's been in Yellowstone. She's been in New Mexico. I'm sure she could explain to you all the places she's searched. So I brought her for that reason. She's been to a lot of places. She's been to Yellowstone. She understands how special Yellowstone is. And so I just wanted her to be here to chime in wherever she wants to. And same with Sean. He's searched Yellowstone. A lot of people have. So.
And I'm wearing my honorary shirt tonight, my Yogi Bear Jellystone Park shirt.
Thank you.
My logo is so much smaller, but still for you, Alan.
Yellowstone. Oh, nice.
Yes, very nice.
There you go.
I know the Yellowstone Forever Institute.
Yes.
Awesome. And I'm drinking a Flip Side from Sierra Nevada today. It's a red IPA. Just for the flip side, I'm not a big red IPA fan, but I couldn't pass this up. So
very nice.
Sean,
Thank you.
Thank you to Cynthia for
cheers. Cheers to everybody in the chat room. We'll just say hi to them really quick. We totally ignore them throughout the show, so we might as well say hi now.
I'm drinking water.
Where's that margarita? I promised everybody a big old ass margarita.
Maybe later.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Sir Crow was our front running bastard in the show tonight, so we're going to give him the props for that. But I want to say hi to Hooley, Jan Schultz 174, Jimmy Fast. He's now back to Jimmy Fast, not Jimmy Slow-Mo. Christy Fiorella, or one of our friends, been on the show a few times. There's Alan Kelly in there. Journeyman. Keep going through here. There's a lot of chat before we got in here. Sasha Johnson, how are you? Nothing about that. That's a new one I haven't seen. Mr. Quiver. Red X, how are you? Robert Slinzitsky, Milan Finner, Tom Sawyer, Anna Graham. I think I'm catching up. Davio 22, my brother from another mother. Hatchet Jack, haven't seen you in a little bit. Good to see you in here. Sledneck, always welcome. Zozo Rocks, how are you? Belva Jenkins, all pain, no gain. Meh, Michael, how are you? John Ito, I think I caught up with everybody there. William Ortiz in the house. Jason Dent, CMC, Mark Warren, and that is it. We are caught up. So hi, everybody.
Hey, I just see Jason Dent said he's going to stay on until he gets bored. Jason, I watched you unravel pennies for 4 hours on a Saturday. I'm pretty sure you could hang out for a bit here.
Burn.
That's okay though. So Sean, is it cool for me to share my screen or my PowerPoint now?
Absolutely, man. You got the con.
All right, let's see if this works. Let's see if I can minimize these videos.
I've got to get the chat where I can see it and I don't miss what you're showing us there.
All right. Okay.
And guys, I will try and catch your remarks in the chat, but if I miss them, again, I'm trying to pay attention to what Alan and Cynthia are saying. But I will try and keep an eye out for your comments.
All right. So jumping right in, and yeah, feel free to ask questions and comments. And if I say something that's inaccurate, please correct me. And same for Sean and Cynthia. I'm not acting like I'm the expert. I'm not even the Yellowstone expert. It's just where I'm searching, and I just have a lot of thoughts and information throughout this PowerPoint. I'm talking about that. So feel free to chime in. But the title here is 101 Reasons Why the Treasure Might be Hidden in or around Yellowstone. So I don't know if it's there, and maybe it's not in the actual park boundaries, but this is my title, and it's all powered by confirmation bias, as we all know. No one knows where the treasure
Powered
is.
by confirmation bias. I love that.
Yep.
I'm going to write that one down.
All right. So some of my information is kind of combating what I call the myths or the interpretations of Yellowstone and why it's not there. So that's where that's kind of where my angle is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Go ahead, Alan.
Yep. So one of the top comments is that Yellowstone is oversearched. There's too many people searching there. There's too many tourists there, period. And it can't be there because it's crawling with searchers and tourists. But Yellowstone is over 2.2 million acres, as many searchers know. There's dozens of rivers and canyons, and just the Madison, Firehole, and Gibbon alone are over 200 miles long. So if you think that the Madison is oversearched, it's 200 miles long. And if the treasure's buried, it's even more unlikely that something can be oversearched. There's hundreds of creeks. There's almost 300 named and unnamed waterfalls. There's 10,000 hydrothermal features, which includes hot springs and mud pots and all those things. And there's over 500 geysers, which is more than half the world's population of geysers. So even if you tried to pinpoint one of these little things as a clue within Yellowstone, there's so much to choose that if you don't have that first warm water salt pinned down, I don't think it matters. So when people say Yellowstone is over-searched, I don't think that's accurate, and I don't think that's possible. And then drilling down just one more, it's the popular warm water salt and Homer Browns of a lot of searchers. People have given up on Yellowstone. I think Sean has, maybe he could speak for himself there, but there's a whole list here of top search locations that people consider in Yellowstone, the Madison Firehole. I won't read these all off. And basically if you circle this map, from left all the way around to right, someone has started their solve or found a Homer Brown or a warm water salt. So there's dozens of solves, if not hundreds or thousands. And so I just wanted to flag that I don't think it's possible that Yellowstone can be oversearched. It could be overcrowded with tourists, but I don't think it's possible that someone can
Sure. Yeah. Like what did Forrest Fenn say in 2014? It's highly unlikely anybody would get within 12 feet and not find it.
Yep.
And then, he gives this update when I ask him, does he want to update that? And he says, better not answer that question. So is it possible somebody has been within 12 feet? And what is probably the most popular searched area would be Yellowstone. So you can't rule it out. Even if your interpretation doesn't lead you to that, you can't rule it out until this thing is completely found. So I think everything is still on the table.
Okay.
And should be.
I just saw Jimmy Fast ask if I could enlarge the pic. I think he's talking about the map. I can't just because it's in PowerPoint. Otherwise, I'll break everything. But I just Googled Yellowstone map. I don't know where this is. But I'm happy to share this entire PowerPoint afterwards. So maybe I could put it on Box and Sean can link to it. So I'll do that for you guys.
Sure.
My next kind of chunk is just the decades of memories. And I put this quote at the top because it's always where I go back to when he talks about in his reverie and, sitting here past midnight type of quote. Every time he's in his reverie or is reminiscing, it always seems to be, or it's very commonly Yellowstone or back in those days. So I'm just going to read this quote. The spot where I hid the treasure was in my mind from the time I first started thinking about the chase. It is special to me and there was never another consideration. I was going to make it work no matter what. In my reverie, I often find myself stealing away to that place, and I will always consider it to be mine. So everyone's read that quote, and yeah, you could say that's New Mexico. People say it's in Colorado, wherever. So that quote right there doesn't mean that it's Yellowstone, but it's the rest of it that it draws me to Yellowstone, which he spent 20 summers in Yellowstone from 1930 to 1950. And on The Road with Charlie, I think he said that he hadn't been back there since 1950, and he was quick to correct that statement that he
Yep.
hasn't been back there spending summers since
Yep.
1950.
And people are all over him when that came out. Everybody's like, oh, see, it's not in Yellowstone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I might have a couple other examples, but rarely does he correct statements. But there's a couple times he's corrected a statement to make sure that Yellowstone wasn't excluded. This is one of them. The Pinions was one of them. I think they might have a couple more in here. But anyways, he corrected that statement. Then in Everything is Stories Radio, and I can send you guys links to this, he said he had been spending about 27 years there visiting Yellowstone every summer, even when he was stationed in Bitburg, Germany. So it's more than just the 20 summers. He said he was still visiting Yellowstone every summer, even when he was stationed in the Air Force. So it goes beyond 1950. It goes all the way into his 60s, into his Air Force days.
Yep.
And then in one of my favorite videos of all time is the Davio 22's Cody interview. That's when he says the phrase, "My heart was always in Yellowstone." I think that he followed that up with "My heart's in Yellowstone in the summer and my heart's in New Mexico in the winter," which is a cool little clarification. But I think we all know what season he hit the chest in, and that would be summer, or at least spring.
Yep.
So if his heart was always in Yellowstone, and then he qualified that with it's summer, again, my mind points me to Yellowstone. Again, in the Cody interview, he says he's still, and this was in 2006, he said he was still coming back to Cody and Yellowstone 4 times a year. I don't know if that was an accurate statement, but that's what he said in that interview. So even in 2006, he said he was still going back to Cody and Yellowstone 4 times a year. And he was a member of the McCracken Research Library and the board of whatever trustees at the Cody Museum. So there's reasons why, but he said that Cody was just, wasn't the destination. It was just a stop on the trip. So he had been going to Yellowstone for years and years and years, well past his childhood. And then what I didn't do, which maybe I could have done, is I was going to pull every single story and mention of Yellowstone from Thrill of the Chase, Too Far to Walk, and Once Upon a While, and his scrapbooks. That just takes too much time. So I just wanted to pull out 2 from Thrill of the Chase. That's the most important. That's when he talks about In Love with Yellowstone, and also his One-Room Cabin in Paradise. And both of those, it's just talking about Yellowstone. He's in love with it. It's his paradise. And it just reminds me of him going back in his reverie, stealing away to that place that he always considers to be his and his alone.
Sure.
In Mysterious Writing, 6 Questions, 2019, he said, "I am almost umbilically attached to the spot. And as I approach," my videos are blocking here. As I approach 89 years, my desire to be there is still strong. The immediate landscape will probably remain about the same for as long as time has to go." So this doesn't point to Yellowstone, but a lot of conversation and analyzing has said that when he's talking about umbilical, he's talking about his childhood or his youth.
Sure.
When he's talking about being umbilically attached to something, it's usually something he had a long time with. I think he's referred to some friends like that, umbilically attached to them, things like that. So in my mind,
well, I think what I like about that, and this is what DeCall and I talked a lot about when earlier this year on the 4th, we actually did a kind of an initial analysis of the 2019 6 questions. The thing that really we picked up on is it says the immediate landscape will probably remain about the same for as long as time has to go, which really speaks to an area that is protected. It's an area that most likely is not going to see any kind of land development, that is already somewhat protected in a way, which when we admitted to in that 6 questions video that is good for those who think it's in Yellowstone, but also good for other areas, that are somewhat deemed protected areas, or could be, that fall under national parks or national forests, or anything that is administered by the BLM as well. So, yeah. So I can see how you would take that, and you can see that as, you can't say it's a confirmation of your thing, but I see you nodding your head, Alan, so you're obviously agreeing with that, but it is stuff that gives you confidence that this is a very likely area that it could be, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, this could be New Mexico, and his years and love for New Mexico as well.
Sure. It could be the entire Rocky Mountains themselves.
Yep. One addition that I didn't add on here is when he mentions what could affect the landscape, which is rockslides, mudslides, earthquakes, forest fires. Those all apply to Yellowstone. They don't all apply to every search area, so I didn't want to put it in here because it doesn't mean Yellowstone. But if you're not in an area that could be affected by earthquakes, landslides, mudslides, forest fires, I think you're in the wrong spot. Well,
Yellowstone, in an area, while it's protected from any kind of development, it certainly isn't protected by Mother Nature. She makes up her own rules, right? I mean, if she wants to start a fire in Yellowstone and strike lightning, or if she wants to have a mudslide or an earthquake, I know that's not in Yellowstone, but Mother Nature can do whatever she wants.
Yep. And then the last bullet, this was from Collected Works audio only interview. It's not the popular video that you're familiar with, but someone asked him, what's your favorite hiking spot? And he kind of laughed and said he doesn't have one. But then he said, I've done more hiking in my life in and around Yellowstone Park than any other place. And then maybe a couple seconds later, and then he said, and also in New Mexico. Yeah. So his first instinct was just, he's done more hiking in and around Yellowstone Park. And again, it just goes back to the decades of memories, and that just seems to be where he has the most history.
Yeah.
Jumping in, this is a big one for me. A lot of the counterpoints for why it's not in Yellowstone or even Colorado is that it's too far. That someone dying of cancer would not risk or even want to drive further than basically their backyard, or at least his home state or his home area. But my biggest thing is that's exactly what his father did. When his father had cancer, he was still fishing up in Yellowstone in what Forrest says, those fast-moving streams and lakes. Yep. And all of these thoughts manifest themselves in my treasure chest. So he's thinking about his dad dying of cancer. He's thinking about his dad taking his own life, and spending his last few weeks or months up in Yellowstone or up in Montana fishing. And that's very important to me. So when other searchers say that it's too far, this is a counterpoint to that his dad only has 6 months to live.
Yeah, and he says in that statement towards the end of it, I have said it's in a very special place to me. If I get another disease, my last dying gasp, I'm going to throw myself on top of that treasure chest. Again, like you quoted in the very beginning of this, if Forrest Fenn said, he was going to make it happen no matter what. Damn the laws, damn everything. He was going to make it happen no matter what. But a lot of people, I think, will then go back, and this is one thing I look at too, and I say, well, okay, if the man was going to happen or make this happen no matter what, and if Yellowstone is that special place, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, why would he have to go out and spend all this money with lawyers and everything else if he was going to make it happen no matter what? He didn't care what the eventual finder legalities that we're going to have to deal with. He was just going to make it happen no matter what. I don't care what the legal ramifications of hiding a treasure chest in Yellowstone are. That's my special place. I'm going to do it no matter what. It just makes you question that is what I'm saying now. It doesn't rule it out. I'm just saying those are one of the things that I look at and I question that. I mean, what do you think, Cynthia?
I don't hold much water onto Fenn talking about spending $8,000 or whatever it was on the lawyers. For one thing, didn't he say he did that it was after he already hid the chest? Didn't he actually talk about spending the money on the lawyers after 2010? I'm pretty sure he did.
I don't know.
I would have to find that. So anyway, to me, he hit it wherever he wanted, regardless, just like Alan has said. Then maybe after a year or so, and especially after the chase took off, then maybe he thought, holy moly, I better find out if someone does solve the poem and find the treasure. I need to know what kind of legalities they're going to run into. Sure. So, I mean, that's just my take on it.
It's definitely a possibility.
I just don't think to me, I could care less if he ever went to a lawyer or not. I don't think it means anything.
Sure.
That's me.
But it's definitely a possibility. It's one of those things he could have, like we talked last week, it could have been an adjustment. If he went to a lawyer afterwards, after hiding, went, oh crap, what does my lawyer say about hiding it in a national park? You've got to take it to the superintendent, and then we've all researched a little bit about that. Sorry to cut in on you, Alan, a little bit. I just want to keep this train of thought going. There was one question that somebody was asking as it relates specifically to the slide, Alan, and I want to catch it for you really quick.
It was William.
It was William. I'm sure you saw it too. He says, can you guys elaborate on manifest themselves in my treasure chest? So Alan, I'll let you're the host. So.
Yep. I mean, my answer is powered by confirmation bias. So in my mind, I picture Forrest hiding the chest somewhere where he and or his dad love to fish in Yellowstone. And so it manifests itself by he's not supposed to hide his chest there. It's not allowed according to the laws. Yeah. And he wasn't supposed to do that. And he did it anyway because he was going to make it happen. So in my mind, it's his last homage to his father and to Yellowstone to leave his chest there and die next to it.
I like that. I mean, we always talk about, this place is special to him, but we always ask, why is it special? And if, like you're pointing out here, these thoughts manifest themselves, the thoughts of his father, going up the latter parts of his life and going up and fishing in these special places, then that can really tie into why this place is special, because it ties in with his father and fishing and all those years spent with fishing. I like that. Sure, absolutely. I don't think too many people would really argue that.
Yep.
Cool. Go ahead. You got it, brother.
Yep, I'll keep going. And I do touch on the lawyers on a later slide on both the lawyers.
Sorry, didn't mean to get ahead of you then.
No, I'm glad you did. Okay, so these are some of the spring interviews. And again, it kind of goes back to the decades in Yellowstone. And if you haven't watched the spring interviews from Dale Neitzel, he's got these on daleneitzel.com. He's got them on Vimeo, and now he's slowly uploading them onto YouTube as well. And I could provide links. But basically, this is just the history of the Fenn and Simpson history from Fishing Bridge from 1931 to 1936. And eventually they moved from the Fishing Bridge over to West Yellowstone. And his mother's father had the Simpson cabin camp. And then his father recreated that with Fennhaven. And then I thought it was really interesting, this little story that I'm sure most of you have heard, where when they would unpack all their gear from Fennhaven at the end of every summer, they would drive within Yellowstone half a mile into the trees, unpack the trailer, and hide all of the goods under a tarp. Yeah. And to me, that just screams about the rules. So you can't do that. You're not supposed to be leaving or hiding things in national park, whether it's, a Wonder Bread, a loaf of bread, or whether it's a $3 million treasure chest. So he's establishing that he and his family already used to hide stuff in Yellowstone under tarps at the end of every summer. I just think that's a cool fun fact.
Yeah, it is.
Then again, of course, he talks about 8 to 10 secret fishing spots he had with his dad. He and his dad were professional fishing guides in Yellowstone. He said out on the creek is the best eating in the world. My confirmation bias, just tells me that means that Yellowstone has better eating than New Mexico. So he may talk about eating creme brulee at Rosalia's, but he'd prefer a trout on some Yellowstone river.
I would probably agree with you on that. I bet you he probably likes that more.
Yep. And then this bottom right picture, it's just a cool story. He's talking about fishing at Hebgen Lake in a little hole of weeds, and he catches this 6-pound brown trout. And it's just the way that he tells the story, and the smile and like this glint in his eye. You could tell that in his reverie, he's going back to that exact moment and picturing that trout taking that hook. And the more I hear Forrest tell these stories about Yellowstone and fishing and his dad, it's that
you see that twinkle in his eye when he talks about those things. Absolutely.
You do. So again, confirmation bias, but that's what I look for, and that's what I see.
The thing is, you can't rule confirmation bias out. There's absolutely no way to do it. You can't. There's just, again, we have so much information that it's nearly impossible to do that. You could try your best to mitigate it, and there's been a lot of positive comments in here, Alan, from people, even like Jason Den. He's saying lots of research, good to see some of these points again. A lot of this stuff, is good to go back over and talk about. Yep. So keep going.
Good call out, Jason. I know this isn't groundbreaking stuff. I'm just trying to put it all in one spot. So that's my point here. So I know it's not groundbreaking.
Good job.
Yep. All right. And then the last one, it's a different interview than the last 5, but it's still spring interviews. He's talking about summer logging in Yellowstone. Specifically, he was logging by Hebgen Lake. But again, he says it was one of the greatest experiences of his life. And he loved that country and the fast running water and Hebgen Lake full of trout. But also in that story, he talks about the lodgepole pines being heavy loads. So they were heavy loads that they had to carry across the lake and up and down hills. So just a little fun fact that lodgepole pines could be heavy loads, or wood in general. So for anyone looking for trees or fallen trees or wood, a little fun fact in that summer logging interview.
So apparently the new drinking game in the chat room is every time you say reverie, everybody's supposed to take a shot. So Alan, just so you know, if you want to get everybody in the chat room that is drunk, just keep saying reverie.
I will have no memories if I keep saying reveries. All right. All right. So again, I've already touched on Davio's Cody interview from.
Great interview. Thank you so much, Davio, for posting that. Good job.
Yep. I wrote 2017 because that's when it was published, but I think the actual interview was 2006, 2007. Mm-hmm. So just quickly hitting on a few of these things. So Forrest went to this interview for Cody. I think they were talking about the Buffalo Bill Cody Museum. But in that interview, he said he drove 891 miles the day before just for that interview. So again, when people say it's too far to drive to Yellowstone or Cody or Wyoming, Montana, he did it all the time. And he did it just for a 1-hour interview at the Cody Museum.
Sure.
Again, this is the same interview. He said, my heart's always in Yellowstone. I already touched on that. He talks about being a fishing guide since he was 12 years old. So not just that he was a fishing guide. I mean, he was a fishing guide in his formative years in Yellowstone every single summer, and that's pretty huge. I already mentioned that Cody was just the highlight of the trip. It was never the destination. Yellowstone was always the destination. So just reiterating that. One thing that he talks about in this interview that I wanted to flag is that, and it goes back to rules and where Forrest doesn't always abide by the rules. And in fact, he flat out breaks laws. I mean, he said he needed bronze to create a couple welds back in, a couple sculptures back in the Air Force, and he stole a bunch of sprinkler heads from Texas Tech in the middle of the night. Like he casually talked about that, but I mean, he's stealing sprinkler heads from Texas Tech. I mean, granted, he said he paid it back later, I'm sure, with money or other things, but I mean, he's stealing sprinkler heads from a local college, and that's just crazy to me. I'm just gonna, I don't want to duplicate things here. A lot of memories of his mother and father, all kind of married together again. So he talks about marrying the clues to a map, marrying stories together, crossing lines. And in this interview, he said that, you know, Yellowstone and Cody just kind of married all these memories together of his mother and his father and fishing and all of that, just all together. And again, it goes back to that manifesting itself in the treasure chest.
Sure.
And I think I've already commented on all that. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. Jason Denn's Playboy interview. I think my second favorite interview, maybe the first one of the year. So between this one and
great, outstanding interview. One of my favorites.
I agree. This one was awesome. Yep. So in no particular order, and these are not time stamped. I could probably send you these later. He says when he got his Rockwell Commander, the whole world changed for him. So he already had his gallery in Santa Fe, and he needed that Rockwell Commander, that airplane, to get him to California or Simi Valley, or other places. So it wasn't good enough that he had a gallery within Santa Fe, New Mexico. He needed to spread his wings, literally and figuratively, to kind of take over the world. But another kind of like that bronze story is like he breaks rules. He landed on the 18th fairway of Simi Valley Golf Course so he could buy some paintings and some other stuff off some lady. And he said he only had 15 minutes because that's how long it'll take for the sheriff to get there.
I love that story.
It's awesome. And
it is a great story.
He may be exaggerating, but I bet you 90% of that's accurate. But again, he's breaking laws.
But he talks about, I think he talks about in that Playboy interview, him actually researching that fairway and knowing how big it was, everything else, and what he could do based on his previous experiences, you know, in flying. I mean, it's, golly, I just love that story. I mean, just talking about finding a way. If the dream is big enough, the facts won't count, you know.
I love that. And that's very in Forrest's mindset. But again, confirmation bias tells me that, you know, I replaced sheriff for ranger, and it's kind of the same thing in Yellowstone. So you grab that chest and you run because you've only got a few minutes before someone's going to see you with their binoculars. And I've experienced that in Yellowstone, but that's just fun bias. Again, and I'm going to try to pull up this quote later, but he's talking about the most rewarding things he's ever done is when he threw open the hangar doors and left his hangar and flew into the Yellowstone or Wyoming or Montana, or the Front Range of the Rockies. So that's in this interview as well. I'll touch on that later. And then he spent $8K on lawyers. And I don't know if now's the time to pull up. I'll wait. So he talks about the lawyers in this, and I'll hopefully get there later.
Yeah, that's the what if question. Who's the rightful owner? Yeah.
That's one of them. Yep.
It's a good one.
Yep. Sorry, a lot of text here. So don't bother reading. My manager would kill me at work if I did this in a PowerPoint. So it's just about long distance trips. And it's just like that first one. That's how badly my father wanted to come up to Yellowstone. It took us 5 days to go 1,600 miles. And that's, again, the Cody interview. Yeah. And I just feel like Fenn's in the same mindset, which it doesn't care how far it is or if he's dying of cancer or anything. That's how badly he and his family wanted to get up there. Again, he drove 891 miles in 1 day for the interview. That third bullet, I'm not sure if everyone has seen this one, but it's a fun one that he said, I didn't say in Santa Fe, I said in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe, and that could be 800 or 900 miles north of Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. And as the bullet above, 800 or 900 miles north of Santa Fe, that's Wyoming again, or straight in the middle of Yellowstone. That's a Lucky Love interview. But that's a good one. But that could be deflection. That could be, I know, expanding the scope of the search beyond New Mexico. I understand that. So it's confirmation
Well, yeah,
bias.
he's not going to rule it out anymore. At that point in time, in 2016, he had already ruled out Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and he had really narrowed it down to those those 4 Rocky Mountain states. So that was no, it wasn't anything new. It should have been inferred at that point in time.
Yep.
Yeah.
The next one's Margie Goldsmith, and I just wanted to call the yellow, which is Peggy didn't always know where he was going, and she kind of let him do what he wants. So another argument is that he couldn't have went to Yellowstone because Peggy didn't know he had the treasure, or she didn't know he had it within 6 weeks or 6 days or 6 months or whatever that quote is. She didn't know where he was going a lot, and she allowed him to just go do it. How can life get better than that? I mean, he says it right there. So again, it's not saying that it's a new Yellowstone. It's just showing that Peggy is not a reason why it can't be in Yellowstone, or Peggy's approval or knowledge of the whole thing.
Good point. Yeah, great point.
Yep. This is a good one, and this is I feel like it's an aha moment. It's Collected Works 2013. Someone was jokingly asking him at the Q&A if he would take a partner along, and his immediate answer was, "Do you have an airplane?" They're at Collected Works, so why would he ask someone if they had an airplane to take them to the treasure chest? I mean, again, it's confirmation bias, but that one felt like a slip to me.
I can't remember if that was actually what the question was. It was it was something similar to that, and you may be right, but I think that it may not have been tailored the exact way you're wording it here.
That's fair, and I actually thought Cynthia was there, but it's hard to tell the female voices. But they were talking about asking for his credit card number and his phone number, and then it turned into this statement. And
it was something about, would you take a partner, or would you have a partner, or something like that? And he jokingly asked, "Do you have an airplane?" I think at that point in time, this was 2013. Somebody in the chat room can probably correct us on this, but he had already sold his Piper Malibu Mirage airplane, or the last one he had, which I think he sold in 2007, or it might have been a little bit after that. We all know about that check and the story behind the check of that, or whatever. But I think at that point in time, he didn't have an airplane anymore.
Yep.
Or of his own. So
that's why he needed one.
Yeah.
Okay, gonna keep going here. So another question in that, no, this was Moby Dickens. Someone says, was the car rented? So that's not a new question. But it's just weird to me how he phrased that answer, is that he said, I don't want the exact date to be known because I'm afraid someone will go check the car rental records, blah, 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 and then he deflects.
Yeah.
But if you didn't rent a car, there's nothing to be afraid of, and there's nothing to go check, and who cares about the date? So in my mind, the answer was, yes, I rented a car. And then he blabbed on about it. So why did he rent a car unless he was leaving the area, his immediate area?
But we know how Forrest Fenn is so keen to leaving questions open-ended. He does not give you a yes or no in most ways. You answer him, and he's just going to leave it open to your interpretation. So even that question is completely open to interpretation. You could view it as, yeah, he absolutely had a rental car, or you could view it as, well, he's deflecting a little bit. I mean, and I know you're not saying anyway, Alan, that it is confirmation. It just gets stuff that may give you confidence. I get what you're saying, but he's he's so good at least in my opinion, of just giving open-ended answers to questions.
I agree. And at the same note, I'm like, even if he hit it right in front of his house in New Mexico, I maybe still rented a car just to throw people off the trail. Sure. So totally makes sense. Below that, God Has a Summer Place up there, so he's just talking, it's On the Road with Charlie. There's 2 parts. I'm just talking about, again, his fondness. Maybe this isn't the right spot for this bullet. And then this is what I wanted to play. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's just when he's talking about throwing the hangar doors open. And if it doesn't play, I'll just keep going here.
No, go for it.
And while it's opening up, just wanted to call out the Once Upon a While Denver Museum clue, which kind of aligns with the Northern Arizona University clue. They both happen to be 400 miles from Santa Fe, in kind of different directions. But either way, why would someone find his car at the Denver Museum if he hit it, south of there, whether it's, southern Colorado, northern New Mexico? Why would he drive all the way to Denver if he's hiding it in New Mexico?
Yeah.
Or so that's just a...
In Santa Fe, I had a...
Can you hear that before I keep going?
You probably need to turn it up just a little bit on the volume.
Which part? Okay.
There you go.
All right, let me see if this works.
Piper Malibu Mirage. Carried lots of fuel. It had a 43-foot wingspan, and I could go out there all by myself, push the hangar doors open because I didn't want anybody to help. Crank that airplane up, get permission from the tower to take off, and head north and then turn my radio off. I had no idea where I was going to land, what I was going to see. I didn't even care. I had 600 or 700 miles before I had to think about that. But I had GPS and I had maps. I'd find a little town up in Wyoming or Idaho, someplace in Montana, and look on my map, see if it had a rental car or an airport. If they did, I'd land and rent a car and go out and sit by the lake or the river. I did that and tell a story about that in Lander, Wyoming. The little Popo Aggie River runs through Lander. How can you not stop? The little Popo Aggie River runs through town.
So sorry, getting back in here. I think I'm still sharing my screen now.
That's it.
Yeah, so it's nothing groundbreaking. That's a very popular quote. He also talks about the same story in Too Far to Walk, page 212, coincidentally, called Heading North. And I think in that chapter, he said it was the 4 greatest days of his life. And again, it goes back to just like he's talking about these moments in Yellowstone or during that time, which is the greatest moments, the best experiences, unforgettable times. And it goes back to those memories / our
I think it's a lot about Forrest Fenn enjoying those times where he has the freedom to do what he wants. It's no different than him jumping out of the window in Spanish class when Mrs. Ford wasn't looking. He'd jump out through the iron fire escape, and because the smell of sunshine and wanting to be out there was just too much. He always wants to be out doing his own thing. He hates organized education. Well, he doesn't hate it, at least in my opinion. He has a disdain for organized education and just wants to do his own thing.
Yep.
But
all right, I'm going to keep plowing here. Lots of stuff on rules, and I'm definitely not going to read all this stuff. I just, again, wanted to flag that he does not follow the rules. He likes breaking rules. But a few people like to comment that, one, he couldn't hide it in Yellowstone because it's against the rules, and I'm going to challenge that. And then he talks about staying on trails. Let me just jump into it.
Well, how do you, when he talks about trails, I mean, he does, and I think you're going to hit on this one. He does talk about, when was it? I think it was in Mysterious Writings of 2014. He said, generally speaking, there are places where one should stay on trails. Yellowstone is one of those. And then he turns around and says later, he says, when I'm in the mountains or in the desert, the last place I want to be is on a trail. The treasure is not located within very close proximity to a man-made trail. So, I mean, if Yellowstone, if we are to believe it is in Yellowstone, most of the places we're supposed to be is on the trails. We know how deadly it is to walk off the trails. Doesn't mean there aren't places where there aren't established trails that you can walk. One of those is Rabbit Creek, and I went up there. There's not really an established man-made trail. It's almost more of a game trail, more like bison and bears and everything else that go up that way. But I mean, those are kind of things that almost make you think, is it not Yellowstone? It doesn't rule out Yellowstone. It just makes you, he's trying to tell us there's certain places that you're supposed to stay on established trails, and that is Yellowstone is one of those. But the last place he wants to be is on a trail. So it's almost, is that a contradiction? Is that that to me gives me confidence that it may not be in Yellowstone. I'm not ruling it out, but it just makes me believe it may not be.
Yep.
So Sean, can I interject here real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So because I also searched Yellowstone, believing it can be there.
Sure.
So maybe this is just Forrest's way of covering his own butt, that he is actually telling people in writing that he is telling people that Yellowstone is a place that they should stay on the trail. So that sort of covers his butt. If searchers do get caught off trail, they can't say, well, look at this, Forrest Fenn says I need to leave the trail.
But
so
if it's supposed to be no place for the meek, are we being meek and following the rules? Are we those people that are not mavericks? No, and I'm just playing this game with you, Cynthia, that I'm agreeing in the fact that no place for the meek could be a place in Yellowstone that you would go, and you're a little bit of breaking the rules a little bit. If Forrest Fenn is a little bit of a rule breaker, I'm not saying that, I wholeheartedly believe it's there. I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with you that it could be there. and
Yeah.
no place for the meat could be going along that lines. And you've got the other. Go ahead.
One other real quick thing for the people who don't know the entire Yellowstone Park area well. It's not all the geothermal dangerous areas where they say stay out because you're going to fall into a scalding geyser or hot water. If you get to the eastern side, and I'm sure Alan's going to cover this. I mean, I've hiked back the Slough Creek area. I mean, then you're totally away from any of the thermal stuff there. So the only thing I think you have to worry about if you get off the trail is a ranger seeing you do it. But, anyway,
the most heavily trafficked area is along the Firehole Canyon, and then going all the way up to Old Faithful. When you get out Lamar Valley, out in those areas, you just don't get as much traffic because people don't appreciate those as much because everybody just wants to see the geysers and stuff.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And so I agree. I mean, that's like one of the top things, which is the camping in Yellowstone, because he says you need to stay on trails. But to your point, he says, but he doesn't stay on trails. And going back to Scrapbook 204, isn't he talking about his family going off the trail into the bushes to pick huckleberries amongst the grizzly bears and black bears? So he's talking about right there in the most recent scrapbook, going off trail to pick berries among bears. So,
and I like what you said, Cynthia, the fact that he's had to adjust, and he's learned a lot over the chase, that he does sort of need to cover his butt a little bit. I mean, look, when we lost Paris, Eric, and Randy all in water, but then he turns around and he doesn't completely rule water out when he had the chance to, as you say, kind of cover his butt a little bit and say, keep your ass out of water because it's not in water. He just says it's not underwater.
Yep.
Sorry. I had to interject that, my powered by confirmation bias. Thank you, Alan Kelly.
No, I agree. And it's on my lawyer slide, but I feel like it's the same reason why he won't say buried. And he doesn't just say it's not buried. He said he won't give that as a clue. Because again, I feel like it's covering his ass. Because if he says it's buried and you got people bulldozing holes in the Yellowstone, wherever, he's responsible for that.
Well, like Colorado Brado says in here, Colo Brado, I can't get the name right. He says, I think that no place for the meek is most likely a place where most people wouldn't go, but not a place they shouldn't go. Most people don't know that there's many places in Yellowstone you can go off the trail, like Alan and Cynthia are both saying. So it doesn't completely rule it out because he said, most places in Yellowstone you're supposed to stay on the trail. So,
yeah, it's a fun one. It's definitely a Fennism right there.
Yeah, it can be taken again, like we said earlier. Most of his statements can be taken either way. It's a completely open-ended answer.
Yep.
Open to interpretation, folks.
Yep. All right, going to keep going. So I'm not going to read these. A lot of these, again, are just about rules. Sean, you'll probably appreciate that a lot of these are just about rules with writing. So, I make up a lot of rules to protect myself. I don't have any rules. You guys have rules. He's talking about Doug Preston, Michael McGarity. Why do I have to live by everybody else's rules? I told myself early on that I didn't really want to break any rules, but I sure as heck am going to stretch. I sure as heck going to stretch the heck out of some of them.
Yep.
He's got rules, but he doesn't follow other people's rules.
Yep. I love where he says, how do you know where the edge is if you don't go out there and look? How are you going to know where you can break a rule and where you can't? Again, I was going to make it happen no matter what. Is he trying to find a place that he can skirt the rules a little bit? I mean, doesn't rule out Yellowstone. Again, you can leave something there. You can abandon something there willfully or purposely or accidentally. So it doesn't rule it out. You just have to follow the rules. Well, if you want to tell everybody you found it in Yellowstone, if that's where it was, then you better be ready for Uncle Sam to come down on you, I guess.
Yep. All right, I'm going to keep going. So These are the two lawyer quotes, and I would love to just play these. So one of these is CBS News, and the other one is from Jason Dent's Playboy interview. Yep. So instead of reading all these quotes, hopefully I could just play this because I think it's important to listen to both of these.
Yep.
And hopefully this is all going to work well.
Yeah, just now pause it really quick before you do. Pause it. Do you see where the little volume is, the speaker?
For me?
Right there. Okay, It is all the way up. Okay. So I was just making sure that's up where everybody can hear it. It was a little low last time. There you go. All right.
I'll put this up to 100.
Okay. Now go for it.
National Forest, maybe Indian land? What have you figured out if the treasure is found in those areas? Who owns it?
This is not something that I jumped into superficially. I mean, I tried to think of everything. My feeling is if you can find a treasure chest, you can have it.
But if I find the treasure and it's in a national park, don't I have to share it with Uncle Sam?
I spent a bunch of money with a lawyer to figure out the question about who owns it, if it's found on public land, on private property, or on Indian land. And there's all kinds of answers. If it's found in a national park, according to my attorney, the person that finds it is required to take it to the park superintendent. The rules are different if you find it on private property. If you find it on Indian land, it really gets complicated.
And the person who finds it has to deal with the legal questions.
Well, if there's a legal question, yeah. What if there's not a legal question? My argument is the person that finds it is going to own it.
All right, I'm going to pause that one. Sean, did you want to chime in before I play the next one? Or
Yeah, I do. Because you actually commented on the original version of that video that came from CBS, and you had said something about the fact that it's not considered a trove unless the owner of the original owner of that can be ascertained. Did you not?
I think so, and that might be in the Playboy interview version. But
No. It's in the original CBS Dateline one where you had said, but the meat and potatoes of it was that it can't be considered "quote unquote" a trove unless the owner can't be ascertained. So you care to? And this was over a year ago that you had said that. I think it was 2018. What did you really mean by that?
Well, shoot, are you referring to?
We got to test your memory.
2018, man. I think I was in New Mexico then. I don't have an answer for you, and I wasn't ready for a curveball here because I don't remember what I commented on. But I mean,
well, can't the owner obviously be ascertained? I mean, there's so much public knowledge and information that there is a bronze treasure chest that weighs 42 pounds out there, with all these 265 gold coins, these other, we all know what they are, that's in there, with the exception that we haven't seen a picture of the olive jar, so to speak, or that quote unquote special item that's saved especially for the finder. So shouldn't it be easy to ascertain who the owner is, whether that person is alive or not alive?
100%. I mean, if he's alive, it's really easy to confirm because he'll say, yeah, Alan or someone found it in whatever place it's theirs. My poem says it and it's theirs, and here's my lawyers. And if he's dead, he's got the DNA analysis in there or whatever, carbon dating his samples of hair and his biography. So either way, it's easy to identify the owner. And I think he's established in the next clip that it's abandoned and it's a trove. And he calls out those two phrases specifically, saying that basically it's abandoned property.
I agree with that. Cynthia, what do you think about that?
I agree with what you guys said.
I love that. Just agree with everything we say. This is, again, Christy last week was agreeing with everything us men was saying. Now Cynthia's agreeing with what is going on here. It's raining cats and dogs.
She's drinking water too. This is crazy.
I know.
I mean, you know what? I'm so enjoying this because Alan is confirming my search area between Cody and the eastern boundary of Yellowstone. So this is like he just did all my homework for me.
But the thing is we can't rule it out. I mean,
right.
Everything is giving you a lot of confidence. I mean, I don't think any of us can confirm anybody's search area. I think unless we find it, but I think it definitely should give people that like the Yellowstone area a lot of confidence. There's a lot of good information. Alan's doing a great job of putting this in a very legible and linear fashion to give everybody stuff, but you can't rule it out. There's going to be a lot of people that are not going to agree that it's in Yellowstone, and that's fine too, but we can't. Nobody can prove Alan wrong, except Forrest.
My wife does every single day.
I mean, that's the whole point. So keep going, Alan. You're doing a great job.
Yep. All right, I'm going to jump into the next one, and this is two things. One, this is from a Jason Dent's Playboy interview, but this other account, You Shop, We Ship, which maybe some of you are familiar with, he's just chopping up quotes and using them. So my apologies of Jason. Anyways, I'm not a copyright guy, but let me know if you want anything pulled.
Well, we'll put let me know, and we'll put the links in the description below so people can go to them and actual, to that person's YouTube channel if they want to watch them later on too. So
cool.
That's always good to do.
So this is 2 minutes, 47 seconds. So buckle up if you want, but I really like this quote. Again, it's about lawyers and that somebody's going to find it soon. So for anyone, this is kind of promising, but here we go.
Somebody's going to find that treasure. And Pandora's box is going to open really wide. What happens now? And I said in a story that someplace I said, if you find a treasure, put it under your bed for 30 days and do nothing but think about it. Don't do anything but think. There's a number of decisions that have to be made. Who's going to appraise it? What's the IRS going to do? But I spent $8,000 with attorneys to find out what happens if it's found on government land, Indian land, or private property. And the water is so muddy that a lot of people think it's in Yellowstone. A lot of people think it's in Glacier. Probably more people think it's in Glacier than Yellowstone. But if it's found in Glacier, assuming that it's abandoned property, you're required by law to turn it into the superintendent of Glacier National Park. He has 3 or 6 months to seek me out, to find me, and return it to me. Then what happens next? What is my responsibility for the guy that found me? And if you rent a cabin in West Yellowstone, what are you renting? You rent the bed, you rent the kitchen, you rent the cabin and the roof, you rent the front yard. So if I buried that treasure in the front yard in the cabin that I rented, it's on my property, right? Am I wrong? I mean, if the government has an easement into your land, like utility people, the telephone people have a legal easement to come on your property to work on your telephone on the telephone. If I buried it on that easement, what does the law say about that? And what does the word buried mean? What does the word sepultured mean? What does the word entombed mean? And what's the relation between, what's a trove? What does abandoned mean? What's the difference between abandoning something and storing it? How muddy the water can get? The lawyers can't figure that out.
So sorry, Joel. The lawyers can't even figure that out, but he did it anyway. And what you guys were talking about earlier is that Dale Neitzel said that he hired these lawyers after he hid the chest, and that makes this even more interesting to me. Like after he hid the chest, he was going to do it no matter what, where he wanted. He still hired a lawyer and specifically asked him what would happen if he hid it in a national park. And yes, he talks about Indian and private lands, but he never really talks about those lands. Every time he talks about this, he clarifies, if it's in a national park, this is what happens and this is what you have to do. And that's just really interesting to me. The other thing I'm going to call out is that he said most people are searching in Glacier. And I was talking to Cynthia and Sean that seems like a big deflection because I'm pretty sure most people are not searching in Glacier. I'm assuming it's either New Mexico or the greater Yellowstone area and not Glacier, as far as the most people. So why does it? Yeah, go ahead.
And I see Red X had said in here, he said, I don't buy Dow's comment on the fact that, and I'm assuming Red X is talking about Forrest Fenn hiring lawyers afterwards. And Red X, I can't confirm or deny that either. Actually, we're planning on having Dale in here later if and when we get to an encore, and we can ask him that question. So be prepared for that, guys. We get Dale in here. And Dale, if he's watching this, be prepared. Better have your backup information on this because we'd like to know. I mean, let's clarify that for certain, because right now we're just conjecturing about it. We don't have all the information. One thing I wanted to, if I could comment on that last video that you put up there, Dale, Alan, one thing that he really talked about, is it abandoned property or whatever? The line from the poem where he says, so why is it I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? To me, and you're shaking your head, so I know we're probably saying the same thing here, and I want to get Cynthia's opinion on this too, but doesn't that really talk about the legalities of that actually being abandoned property? It's almost like he's saying in his own terms that I willfully abandoned this trove, my collection of things, for all to seek. Now, we know only one person's going to find this. One person's going to trip over it. One person's going to uncover it. One person's going to walk directly to it, and that's it. But we all have the same ability, all the same information to find it. So why is it I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? I mean, to me, that really speaks to the legalities of it actually physically being abandoned property. Cynthia, what do you think?
I agree. I think the fact that Trove's in there, that somehow he does know something that's the, so he created the poem before he ever hit it and before he got the lawyers involved. But I still think that I think he knew that trove was a word he needed to use. And I think that right there is going to, well, the poem says basically if you find it, it's yours. So.
Well, you're bringing up an interesting thing, and Alan, I know you want to interject, but I want to hit on this before you say your part. But then you bring up something very key, and that goes to this question where we're talking about and getting Dale to confirm whether he hired lawyers before or after. If this is so, why is it I must go and leave my trove? The tense nature of that is the fact that he may not have already yet gone and hid the treasure, right? So why is it I must go? It's not like he's already gone, like, as I have gone alone in there. It's almost like before he's gone and hid, he's already using the word trove. He's already saying, why must I go and leave it for all to seek? It's almost like he already understands the legalities of what he's about to do and where he's about to put it, right? I mean, does that make sense, Alan, or not?
That's exactly what I think. And that's the other interview, the last quote on the left.
Okay.
What if there's no legal question? And
Sure.
My argument is that the person who finds it is going to own it because of that language that he inserted into the poem.
Sure. So you think he already knew, and whether he hired the lawyers before or afterwards is irrelevant, or may not be irrelevant. Maybe I look at it and go, okay, what if his special place is nothing more than the Rocky Mountains in itself, in the entirety? And then he went out and hired a bunch of lawyers to say, okay, where within the Rocky Mountains? And he doesn't ask this specifically, but in his mind, he tells the lawyers, where can if I hid this on Indian land, if I hid it on national parks, if I hid it in a national forest, if I hid it on BLM, or if I hid it on private land, what's the legal ramifications of that? And the lawyer comes back and says, well, if it's on here, it's this. If it's on here, it's this. If it's on here and this. Well, intermixed in there, he already knew where he wanted to hide it, whether that be Yellowstone, whether that be on a BLM land or private land or whatever. He already knew where he wanted to hide it. Now he gets his answer that maybe he already kind of knew, but it confirmed that to him. Does that make sense? So now then he has to interject based on the lawyers, telling him what you need to be able to state. So he has to put that into the poem itself, right? I mean, I don't know. Sorry, I went off on that rant there, and I'm hijacking your discussion here, Alan.
No, thank you. And it's a good one. And to be honest, I'd never heard that he hired lawyers after the fact until Dale recently brought that up on your show. Yeah. So I'd never heard that before. Well,
I'd love to have it confirmed. I mean, I'd love to get that confirmed, sure. But okay.
I was told the same thing by Fenn. But
Great. That may be.
I can't confirm that. So you either believe me or you don't.
Well, that's two. I mean, Cynthia, obviously you're a very credible searcher, and if it's coming from Fenn and we're also hearing it from Dale, we're hearing it from two different sources. So that takes it from possible to more probable that may have happened. But it's a good question to ask Fenn directly, maybe, So go ahead, Alan.
Yep. And then my confirmation bias tells me that if anyone finds it in Yellowstone, tell them that you found it in the front yard of whatever you rented. So if you rented something in West Yellowstone or in the Northeast or in Montana, tell them you found it in the front yard of the Motel 6 or whatever it was.
But if you, what's your front yard? Okay, this hypothetically here, what's your front yard if you rent a camping spot in Yellowstone itself?
That's a good question. And I think he was one step away from.
Is your front yard the whole Yellowstone? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, what if I put a tent up in the Lamar Valley, and I had a 20-foot perimeter and I happened to find it right there? Is it mine? I don't know.
You rented that space. I mean, when I met with Forrest Fenn in August of last year, he asked me that same question. that he talks about in the Playboy interview? What if I hire a cabin or I rent a cabin, and I bury the treasure chest in the front yard, or he didn't say that. Sorry, let me rephrase that. He had said if I rented a cabin, what do I own? What am I renting? Am I renting the property in front of that? And he kind of went that exactly the same way he was saying it, and I don't know exactly, Jason maybe can confirm this, when that Playboy interview took place with Forrest, because it was very close to that same time frame in 2018. So it was fresh in his mind.
Interesting.
It's secondhand information, completely can be, dip your toe in the warm waters halt, kind of thought process, but it's definitely interesting.
Yep.
All right, Alan, sorry, we derailed your whole conversation here.
No, it's cool. And I know Cynthia's like, I don't care about the lawyers or any of that conversation, but
nobody cares about lawyers except Joel Lewicki.
My dad's a lawyer.
Sorry, Joel, we're just
care
kidding.
less about the chase. He thinks I'm an idiot.
Well, he's a lawyer.
Yep. Exactly.
Cheers.
That's on record, Dad, by the way. Live streaming it. All right.
I almost spit my beer out.
So this isn't the prettiest slide, and maybe it's not even the right order. I think the next couple slides are just, appendix for me. But for the people that aren't familiar with the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, whether you're looking in Yellowstone or Montana or Wyoming or New Mexico even, I just think it's very interesting that he was publishing articles in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle before he hid the chase. Some of them were pulled from Old Santa Fe Trading Co. Some of them are early adaptations of stories that you're familiar with. But he's talking about, the fire hole here, and I think he removed the word fire hole and changed that maybe to something more vague.
Very interesting that he did that. Good. Yep. I'm glad that you pointed it out. Very good.
And I think that becomes the river bathing is best. So I'll share links to this. So I'm not going to go into all of it.
That first one on the top left comes out of what is it? Oh, dang it. Flywater, the Flywater chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, and that comes out of the Flywater chapter, but you're right. He did take out Firehole.
Yep.
He said those places or whatever, but it was completely worded differently, and I've got to find it now because it's going to bug the heck out of me.
Yep. Again, and he does that. There's a few. This deck was like 100 slides long, and I'd keep whittling it down. But he does that. There's like old stories where he'll change a word or two words and make it actually more ambiguous.
But you got to ask why he did that.
Yep.
Yeah, and here it is, page 125 of Flywater. He says, and you can follow along here on the top left of Alan's slide, and you can follow me along. He said, those great places, which were personal secrets to me then, are now busy with the flourishes of fishermen and women who cast a midge or floating caddis upon those same waters, never knowing that I had been there or even cared yes or no. So what did he do? He removed out the fire hole. He removed that out. Is that important? Is that out of the box thinking? Is that getting too far out of the book? Is it a rabbit hole? We don't know.
I don't know.
I'm glad that you brought that point up because it is very interesting. And that was something that when I had my whole Yellowstone solve, that was very key to me. Like, oh my God, why did he remove that out of there? Oh my God, that's it. That's a confirmation that it's in Yellowstone for me.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it may not be for you. I mean, it may be a confirmation for you and 300,000 other searchers out there, but interesting.
Yeah. And the edits and the slight moderations to all these stories, that's interesting. And you can go down rabbit holes there, but the high level fact that he was publishing these articles right before he hid the chest.
Sure.
Well, on one argument, you could say that the chest was for the Santa Fe or the New Mexicans. That's where the chase started. And that's where he wanted. But before he even did that, he's publishing these articles with the same stories. So in my mind, it's between Montana and New Mexico, which isn't groundbreaking again. But I'm pulling the search scope more north with these kind of articles.
Yeah, sure.
That's it. So I didn't have anything specifically to call out with any of these, just that they exist. Just some fun stuff. Like, again, this isn't Yellowstone specifically, but just some fun facts for Wyoming or Montana. Wyoming's a cowboy state, and there's tons of stories that he's written about cowboy kings, Main Street Cowboys, Buffalo Cowboys. It's the equality state, and that one might be less interesting to some people, but the book, I forget which chapter wasn't too far to walk, but it's Lessons from Bella Abzug. But that same story was on Old Santa Fe Trading Co. in like 2011. So that story, Lessons from Bella Abzug, is about women's rights and equal rights. And that was written all the way back on Old Santa Fe Trading Company. I just think that's important. And a lot of people maybe are just confused why that story exists. And to me, it screams the equality state. And then the state bird's a meadowlark. So in the preface of Thrill of the Chase, why would people look down on him for shooting a meadowlark? Like most people wouldn't care. That's like shooting a pigeon in my front yard.
So is that a meadowlark in the moon, or is it actually a turtle dove?
The turtle lives in the moon, but a meadowlark is the state bird of Wyoming. So if you shot the state bird, you might be in trouble.
I see Cynthia got all excited when I said that. Look at her. Oh, it could be a meadowlark.
The state animal is a buffalo, and that I'm a big fan of the buffalo. He actually said his first memory ever of Cody was that stuffed buffalo that got eaten alive by bugs. So state animals, buffalo. And then I love that. Why is it that I must go? I know Troy Barlow's handle is Why Must I Go? And maybe it just speaks to Wyoming. And for some reason, he talks about Alan K. Simpson, no affiliation with me, as a senator of Wyoming, and how he can quote the entire book of Alice in Wonderland. But why does he keep talking about him? And why does he know the senator of Wyoming?
Right.
And why is that so important? Why Wyoming? I don't know. And then Montana. So Montana's the treasure state. So the same reasons I just argued Wyoming, I hear that all the time from Montana, is that it's the treasure state. So what better place for the treasure to be than the treasure state? And their state motto is Oro, or maybe it's a state seal, Oro y Plata, and that's gold and silver, for anyone that didn't know that. And I just love that story about Montana Golden, where I think he hid his Dr. Pepper in the waters of the rocks, but he also was looking for shrimp, but he also didn't catch anything there. So I'm looking a little south of Montana for that reason, but I just thought it was a little fun fact. But these are just
Can I interject real quick?
Go ahead.
So regarding Alan Simpson, the former senator of Wyoming, I actually ran into him at Cassie's restaurant in Cody last summer. I actually approached him, told him who I was, not my name, but that I knew Forrest Fenn. And he actually talked to me and did confirm that he and Forrest Fenn have been really, really good friends for a lot of years. So
awesome to hear.
There really is a connection between the former senator and Fenn.
That's awesome to hear. Wow. Thank you for that.
That's confirmation bias for me for Cody.
Did you purposely run into him? Did you like bump into him and be like almost knocked apart? The guy's like 90 years old. You probably like hurt him or something.
Yeah, he's fairly old, but he still gets around real well. No, I was actually eating dinner by myself. I was there alone, and I saw him walk through the door. And as he approached me, it's like, holy moly, that's Senator Simpson. I mean, Forrest has published pictures, and the guy must be about 8 feet tall, real tall.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no, he from the pictures that Forrest had, put out there, I knew who it was, and he didn't tell me to go away when I said Forrest Fenn or anything, and no, it was pretty cool.
Right. He said, that old codge, you know Forrest Fenn? Oh, man, I'm going to sit down with you and tell him. You probably could have got some really good stories from him. That would have been awesome.
Yeah. The last time I saw him was when we buried that damn treasure. And
oh, my God.
Right? That would have been awesome.
In Wyoming, just west of Cody.
Yeah, no, let's. Yeah, absolutely. So I got we got one comment here that came from Quanah Parker, and Alan, this is directed to you. He said the problem seems to be that I think he's talking about you, Alan. He talked too much about Yellowstone. His hints are supposed to be more subtle. And I think a lot of people, a good friend of mine, Mike Davis, believes in this, and that if there's supposed to be subtle hints, if he's talking so fondly about Yellowstone and pointing so much towards Yellowstone, do you think that is subtle, or do you think that's more like, Mike likes to call them meteor strikes, like pointing directly at it? It's a good question, and I think a lot of people in the chat room would like to get both you and Cynthia's thoughts on that.
Yep. I just went right back. It looks like it's lagging a little bit in the chat room, but I just went right back to my first slide, which is agreed that Yellowstone is not subtle in any of his stories or any of his books or any of his memories. Sure. It's very apparent that Yellowstone and greater Yellowstone ecosystem was important to him, and he has many, many memories there. But my point goes back to everything is subtle, because the hundreds or thousands of people that think it's Madison Junction have been wrong so far. So even if it's in Yellowstone,
so far,
so
So
far.
far, yeah,
I
so
mean,
far.
and it could be at Madison Junction. Maybe it's
yeah.
buried 3 feet underground, and we're just walking right over it.
Well, it could at least, it's still plausible that it could be where War Waters halt.
Yep.
It's not saying it's not. It's still
Yep.
plausible.
Yep.
Sure.
But I will say that anything that he's called out specifically, I'm a little hesitant to be interested in. Like I am not looking in the fire hole personally. I'm not looking at Madison Junction. I'm not looking at the Totem Cafe. Those are just stories. I'm looking in places that he hasn't mentioned, and those
Sure.
usually end up in rabbit holes. But to your point, I'm looking for the subtle acknowledgments of places, and maybe something that seems like the fire hole, Ojo Caliente, that, anyways. So
what do you think, Cynthia, about that? Like that, what Quanah's saying? Do you think those are subtle? Do you think that that's, if they're supposed to, hints are supposed to be subtle, how could that be? How could it be Yellowstone? I guess is what Quanah's saying.
No, I agree with what Alan just said. I mean, to me, yeah, it's not Ojo Caliente, it's not Madison Junction or the fire hole, but as Alan knows from being there, my God, it is a gigantic, massive area inside the boundaries of Yellowstone. And you don't have to, I assume, I don't know where Alan searches, but I assume that, well, he just said it's not the popular spots. Yeah. I mean, I just know for me, and I wasn't even there as a searcher a few times. But anyway, it's so easy to get away from the places on this list. And you don't have to go far from your car. And there's nobody else there. I mean, I even went back to Sentinel Meadows, which is parking at the Ojo Caliente parking lot, and then just going back along Sentinel Creek. Yeah. And I mean, and there's nobody there.
Yep. Have you ever been up Rabbit Creek, Cynthia?
No, I have not. I know where it is.
You got to go up there. It's beautiful. That was, I had a search area up Rabbit Creek, and I loved it. My water's high was actually the steam from the geysers. And I've never heard anybody else say that. Nobody else ever talked about that.
No, I love that.
I thought I knew it. I was
I'm going there Saturday. Where should I park?
Well, if you find it, all I want is the latch off of the treasure chest. Just yank it off, give it to me. Well, here's one thing I've got to say about, and this is kind of going back to what Quanah Parker was saying, that Yellowstone is not a subtle hint. But my point is those people that are closest to him that are still alive. Okay, and I'm talking about Peggy, I'm talking about Zoe, Kelly, Shiloh, Piper, all the other grandkids that obviously we don't know their names and we don't need to know their names, know about their grandfather. How could he not write a book about his most cherished, fondest memoirs of his life and not mention Yellowstone? He couldn't. Because if he would gone through all his memories and never mentioned it, wouldn't that cause his family to question, how come you're not even mentioning Yellowstone? You spent 20 of your summers there growing up as a kid there. How could you not mention it? How could you not mention your love for it? Unless he completely hated it. Oh, I hated going on that, 5-day trip all the way up there. So it's, and what I'm saying is it's not we shouldn't totally rule out Yellowstone because he mentions it. And we ought to be looking to the place he doesn't mentions in it. What I'm saying is that there's no way that a man that has spent that much time and had those fond memories, reveries, like Alan has done a good job of stating, how could he not mention Yellowstone, right? There's no way he could avoid it. And then people would call him out on it. Even Alan Simpson would call him out on it. Hey, buddy, give my state some props, right? What do you guys think?
I agree. And I love that Cynthia just mentioned the Sentinel, because it's like, I'm sure she pulled that from the treasure chest is standing sentinel over.
Over. Yep.
But that's where you're pulling facts from other places than the obvious straightforward ones in any of his books. So he never mentioned Sentinel in the book, but you're looking Sentinel Creek because there's maybe a subtle hit somewhere else. Like,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, Madison Junction's tiny. You can't look at my cursor on the screen, but to the very far right, you see Mirror Plateau. Like mirror, mirror on my wall. You could go down that rabbit hole. So that's a very subtle clue. But the Mirror Plateau in itself is, dozens of miles long. Like, how are you going to narrow that down? So
yeah,
there's plenty of places to look within Yellowstone that all make sense. And it's all just based on your bias. And no one's going to know until they see that chest.
Yeah. I don't think that we can, while a lot of people want to rule out locations, we've had people on the Flip the Script before that want to try and rule out areas. I think some of the I hate to call them hints, or some of the information or adjustments that Forrest Fenn has given us as far as like elevations, those types of things, can help us rule out certain areas. But I don't think by any means that we can completely rule out Yellowstone National Park. I think, there's been one, let me see if I can pull it up here, and you won't be able to see it. There's no need for me to share it. I can just talk about it. And this came out, this was a featured Q&A going back in, I want to say it was March of 2016. Let me make sure I get this right. May 17th of 2015. This was on Mysterious Writings, and I'll put the link in the description below if I remember. It said, Mr. Fenn, according to recent research about Yellowstone supervolcano, and if I do the math right, there is a 1 in 700 chance that the treasure will get blown to bits in the next 1,000 years. Are you okay with those odds, or does that make you feel like you should move the treasure, preferably somewhere closer to me? And this was written by Chuck. And Forrest Fenn responds, I doubt that a volcanic eruption under Yellowstone Lake would blow the treasure chest to bits, no matter the odds. But it might spread a lot of beautiful cutthroat and lake trout around the countryside. So, I mean, some people look to that and go, oh, well, that's automatically saying it can't be in Yellowstone. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been asked that one. And first off, if the Yellowstone caldera blows, I mean, we're all done. Like, who cares about
yeah. Who cares about the treasure?
It could have been the real answer. But if you're looking at this map, that gray dotted line is the caldera. Yeah. And I believe that's what he's referring to, would blow in Yellowstone Lake. And to be fair, my search area is not within that dotted line.
He specifically, Chuck, the questioner, never says anything about Yellowstone Lake. He's talking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. Yeah. And Forrest Fenn comes back and says Yellowstone Lake, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, he narrows it back down as to not eliminate Yellowstone.
Right. But it's not underwater, right? So don't be looking in Yellowstone Lake.
Yep.
What do you think about that, Cynthia?
Yeah, that's the only quote that I have that makes me wonder. And one of my solves took me to Indian Pond, which was just east of Fishing Bridge. And I mean, I walked right to get to my search area. I actually walked right along Yellowstone Lake. So it's like, nah, I probably shouldn't spend a whole lot of time working on this solution, to modify it anymore. Yeah. Because if you believe, literally take that literally what Forrest said. I mean, I decided I should get away from the edge of the lake.
Sure. Sure. Yep. So I had another question here from William. It said, he says, with someone being 200 feet from the treasure, wouldn't it make sense to go to a place where someone already searched? Well, I think that seems pretty obvious, William. I mean, we're not talking about a place that nobody has searched, but again, we don't know all the places that everybody has searched. I would think that if Forrest Fenn has said, many people have arrived within 500 feet of the treasure, and I'm paraphrasing completely, 10 different probably quotes from Forrest Fenn. He said many people have been within 500 feet, but only several have been within 200 feet. So it's obviously a place that is a known location and probably an obvious, I wouldn't say obvious, but an area that people are arriving there as an aberration, but they don't know that they're arriving in the correct spot. Otherwise, maybe we'd already have this thing found, I guess. Do you guys have any response to that?
Nothing specifically. I mean, I don't have anything to add than what you just said.
Well, I mean, Yellowstone is obviously, that doesn't rule Yellowstone out, because obviously we've had a lot of people there. So you can't rule out Yellowstone, because I think it's obviously a place that many people have obviously gotten within 500 feet, and several have been within 200 feet. So it's obviously got to be a place that we know searchers have probably searched. It's probably published solves have been probably close, at least within the geographical region, at least in my opinion.
Yep. All right, I'm going to keep plowing through here, if that's cool.
Go for it. Yep.
All right. So this is a fun one. It's super biased, of course, but some people, want to know what the hell does Hemingway and Salinger have to do with anything. And I have some fun facts on Hemingway. So one, I recently bought this book. It's called Ernest Hemingway in the Yellowstone High Country by Chris Warren. Chris Warren he owns like a coffee shop in Cook City. And he's been piecing together Hemingway's connection to basically Montana, Wyoming, the LBRT Ranch near Beartooth. And it's just really interesting that I didn't know before the search, and even after reading Thrill of the Chase, how involved and how passionate Hemingway was about the Yellowstone greater ecosystem. So he had the LBRT Ranch, kind of just outside Yellowstone in Wyoming. The Bell Tolls, I think the main character was a Spanish teacher from Red Lodge, Montana. And Hemingway's very last story that he ever wrote was called A Man of the World, and he was from Cook City, Montana. These are all just northeast outside of Yellowstone Gate. So that's just some fun Hemingway facts. And then Salinger, if you haven't read Catcher in the Rye, since high school, I don't think it's a very good book, but I downloaded the PDF and I was just searching through stuff.
Well, Forrest Fenn didn't even think it was a good book.
He didn't. I mean,
he said, if this is a good book, I can do that.
Yeah. But to me, the alignment is that Holden Caulfield is Forrest Fenn. When Holden's talking about Madison Ave and walking to Central Park, it just reminds me of Forrest mentioning Madison River and Yellowstone Park. So Holden Caulfield said that he had Central Park memorized, and he would go in there at night while it was raining and cold. And it's very similar to Forrest's stories about, he didn't ever say Yellowstone and cold, but similar. So this is just a fun slide if you're interested in any of the connections to either of these authors and Yellowstone that I'm trying to.
There's a lot of people that find interesting connections in important literature. So absolutely.
And can I say something here to support Hemingway?
No, you can't. No.
Okay, I won't. Well, I'm going to anyway. I don't care if this is your show. So anyway,
it's not my show. It's Alan's show.
I did a real quick video a month or two ago about the Hemingway connection to my search area, the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone that goes through the. It's between North of Highway and then like Pilot Peak, the east side of Yellowstone Park. Hemingway used to be there. He stayed at the Two Dot Ranch, which was part of my search area, sort of. And then the other thing about Hemingway was his son, Jack, actually wrote the foreword to the book Flywater.
Wow.
So, and in that, I think
that.
it's in that foreword or preface, and this is in my YouTube thing. But anyway, Jack talks about them fishing at Clark's Fork. So they were definitely up there.
Well, I got to tell you a couple connections I have to that area, because I had a solve that was in my opinion, a completely beautiful solve in the area of the Clark's Fork up there in the Beartooth Highway and Chief Joseph bypass all through there. Is that you also have, you talk about the T-Bar Ranch, you've talked about Salinger Ranch, but there's also a ranch called the Riddle Ranch.
Yeah.
And the Riddle Ranch is right up there in the Sunlight Canyon. I think is it Sunlight? Am I getting that right?
Yes.
But there was a Riddle Ranch, and one of the daughters of the Riddle Ranch married a guy by the last name of Brown. And then they actually were rangers there at the ranger station in the Sunlight Canyon area up in there. So I thought it was pretty funny that Brown used to be a Riddle. And I poked fun, but there was obviously the Switchback Ranch, which is on the east side of the Clark's Fork. And that was owned by a guy by the name of John Bugus. And John Bugus was an old Ford Motor Company employee and was also part of the FBI. And he used to shoot a hole through his hat all the time. When you get a new hat, he'd shoot a hole right through the center of it, which reminded me of Annabelle's hat. You wouldn't believe how many different, coincidences and confirmations and confidence builders that I had in that area. But I absolutely love that area. And I always recommend anybody who's up in that area to go up there and check it out. But I could do a whole show on that area.
You should.
No.
All right. I'm going to keep going. And this is my last slide. So Forrest keeps saying the key word is contentment. If you could find it, everything else has already fallen in place. And that's the Mysterious Writing 6 Questions. I forget the year. It was kind of recent. The reason why I'm calling this out is because this is my search area, and I'll get there. But my search area is the Lamar Valley in Yellowstone. And if you go to Searching for Lewis and Clark with Forrest and Donnie, he says he's read Osborne Russell's Journal of a Trapper, more than a few times. And in that same story, he said he and Donnie, reached that canyon, and they narrowed until nothing could get through but waters.
Yeah.
The almost identical description of Osborne Russell describing the Lamar Canyon. But this quote in the box is from Osborne Russell, chapter 5. He calls it the Secluded Valley, Garden of Eden. And he says, I almost wish I could spend the remainder of my days in a place like this, where happiness and contentment seem to reign in wild romantic splendor, surrounded by majestic battlements which seem to support the heavens and shut out all hostile intruders. So in my mind, a lot of things point to the Lamar Valley. I might not be right. I know there's probably maybe 6 people in the chat right now that are searching in that general vicinity for different reasons. But this Osborne Russell quote and searching for Lewis and Clark, and the fact that this was in Old Santa Fe Trading Company and the Bozeman Daily articles back in 2008, he keeps talking about this story and knowing Osborne Russell. And when he talks about important literature and then basically craps on those authors like Hemingway and Salinger, and then he basically worships these dry, journalists like Osborne Russell, that's what screams importance to me. But again, this whole thing is powered by confirmation bias. So to answer some of your questions,
I love that too about the whole fact that he does poke fun at F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway, that he couldn't even stand those writings. Yet he talks so fondly of Osborne Russell's, and he also mentions Robert Redford's book. Well, he kind of hints at it, and somebody out there is going to love the fact that I say that and the fact that I have his book. But what I think is so interesting about the way that the Outlaw Trail is written, and if any of those that have this book understand that the way that is written, I think, is what Forrest Fenn is really hinting at. That what is really important literature, this dry stuff that's not true history or anything, or is it the interesting stuff that Osborne Russell has written, or the stuff that Robert Redford has written about the Outlaw Trail and how it is written, where it's a guided tour of history of somebody who's actually there and taking pictures and partaking in it. That's what I think is the important take out of important literature, in my opinion, is what do we really consider important literature? Is it that stuff of everybody slapping each other's back in the literary field? Or is it stuff that's actually interesting and engages people in history, where you get to actually touch George Washington on his nose, not just look at him from afar or behind a glass counter?
Yep.
That's what I think, to me, is the important takeaway from important literature. Just my opinion. I'm not an authority on the chase. I'm just a dude.
Yep. And this is my last slide because this is where my brain is. I mean, I think someone asked, like, why are you going down rabbit holes? Why are you looking for hints in places that don't exist? Like, I'm having fun, and this is my contentment. Like, I joined this show to, share information, whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter to me. Like, this is fun to me. And so my place of contentment is this chase. And so if you can find it, everything else is falling in place. I may never find the chest, but contentment is a key word.
And that's a great point. I mean, only one person or one group or one search group or whatever is going to find this treasure. What are the rest of us doing in this? If we know that we have a very slim chance of finding this, even in our lifetime, this thing may not be found for 100 years or 1,000 years, but what are we gaining? What are we trying to learn from this? And that's the whole point. I mean, again, he who teaches a child labors with God in his workshop. I think that this whole chase, started with a guy who was theoretically going to take it with him, and, changed when he won his battle with cancer to, he's trying to teach us all something. So if only one of us is going to find it, if that's Alan, Cynthia, me, or one of you 150 some odd people in this chat room tonight find it, what are the rest of us gaining from this? If you're in it just for the money, you're in it for the wrong reason, because your odds are very slim that you're going to find this. So you got to ask yourself, what are you gaining? So these rabbit holes, like Alan just said, are a hell of a lot of fun to go down. You'll learn a lot. You gain interesting knowledge. You get to go see these beautiful places and teach your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your family a lot about these places. And I think that's the greater thing that we all should be looking at and gaining from this.
Yep.
And I will get off my soapbox on that one.
Nope. I'm on that soapbox with you, and I'm going to say reveries, comma, Rio de los Pinos.
Cheers. I need to pour this beer and get it going.
And that's it for your
awesome.
friendly broadcasting service.
For your friendly broadcasting service. I'm pouring another beer here, so cheers to all you guys.
And again, like, I'm going to clean up this PowerPoint and put in links and all that. Oh, I was putting my fun fact. I won Fortis Kitty contest. But anyways, I'm going to clean up my deck, and I'll have links for anyone that wants the links to things. And if anyone has specific questions, you
I got a couple more questions. I've been writing things down. I wanted to get back to towards the end of this.
Let's jump in.
But Quanah Parker says in here really quick, she said, F stories teach us a great deal about morality. I think she's right. Quanah, I say she, I don't know if that's a male or female, but yeah, I think it's right. I think a lot of us, so you can stop sharing so we can go back.
Okay, sorry.
Everybody can see us.
Sorry about that.
But I think, we're all so focused on trying to find these subtle hints that are supposed to be scattered amongst these 32,000 stories in this book that we miss, I think, the overriding lessons that this man is trying to teach us. There's a lot of lessons he's trying to pass on to us about, and that's just, again, just my opinion. It can be very whimsical, but if only one of us is going to find it, what else are we going to walk away from, and what lessons are we going to teach and we going to pass on from this community and this whole treasure hunt? If it is found in his lifetime, or if it's not found for 100 years, what are we going to pass on? Cynthia?
I agree. I mean, no, for me, Alan talked about, for him, this is contentment. For me, it's the adventure, but also it is the solitude, because I always prefer to search alone. And it definitely is about being out there in the wilderness and the solitude. And I totally feel like I can understand what Forrest experienced, whether he was a kid or, a teenager or young adult, or even in his later life.
Yeah.
I just, and this is one thing that, boy, if you've never been to Yellowstone, I don't know if you can understand, just from the words that we're saying, how spectacular of a place that really is. Yep. And I think once you're there, well, this is what happened to me, sort of. Once I was there and saw the Yellowstone National Park, West Yellowstone area, and then even on the eastern side of the park, it's like, how could it not be there? When you see that, it's just so incredible.
Yeah, I think, and I think Christy had said it, something very similar to that last week on here as well, about what you're saying about how could it not be there. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful place. It really is. Absolutely. Yep. And then Quanah Park. Oh, sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, and maybe I shouldn't ask the question, but I could have sworn I heard Christy recently say that she's been in touch with Forrest family members, and even they're looking in, West Yellowstone or the greater Yellowstone area. And like, if Forrest's own family, the ones that are searching in that area, that's credibility right there.
Sure. Well, I mean, they're in the same position we are. If Forrest Fenn has done such a good job of really masking where this place is, again, how could he not tell his life story without mentioning, Yellowstone, and his affinity for that? But yeah, sure. I mean, it gives confidence and credibility to Yellowstone if even his family is looking up there. You can't rule it out. And then there was one other question I wanted to get to. Quanah Parker asked this a long time ago, and I know they're still in here in the chat room to make sure I get to that. But Quanah Parker asked Cynthia directly, Cynthia, have you ever searched in Colorado, and where?
I have never searched for Fenn's treasure chest in Colorado.
Well, there you go,
and the reason is I can't get the book to take me there. So the quotes I like to use most for solving the poem is where he said early on about, read the poem, read the book, over, blah, 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 and look for every abstract thing that pops up in your mind. And then he followed that a few months later with the quote about using TTOTC, the poem over, read the book over and over, and you have to learn where the first clue is. And he is talking about that being in the thrill of the chase. So for me, I'm not saying it's not in Colorado. For myself, I cannot find anything in the thrill of the chase book that takes me to begin it in Colorado. So sure. That's why I've never gone there.
That's a good answer. I get that. Okay, I'm just making sure we don't have any other questions in here that I missed, guys. I'm just kind of going through here. We've had a lot of great people in here tonight asking some good questions. And again, they do a really good job of just ignoring us and talking amongst themselves. We generally do a good job of actually Yeah, GCG says in here, Gregory Colvin Garcia, he said, wasn't Forrest actually referencing Farewell to Arms? Yeah, I think we've all established that when he was talking about For Whom the Bell Tolls, it was actually about a farewell to arms.
But
and
see,
again, go ahead, Alan.
That's why it's like it's calling it's an aberration. Like the mistake was intentional, so why was it a mistake? Like he got the wrong book, he got the wrong war. There was something important. That's obviously why I started.
I look at it and go, okay, well, he didn't even read half the book, and he thought it was boring. Of course, he's going to get it all wrong because he didn't even care to read the whole thing. I look at it that way. I mean, again, it's completely open to interpretation. There's different ways of looking at it. Dale, I know you're in the waiting room here. We'll get you in here in a little bit, so just hang tight. Silver Fox said, Alan K. Forrest said that the hints will not lead a person to the chest, only the clues will. But here we are trying to use hints and not clues to narrow down the search area. Kind of a little bit like what somebody else had mentioned earlier, where are we? I think, and everybody's, and this is just, and I'll let Alan answer it in his own way, Silver Fox. But I think we're all looking for confidence builders or confirmation builders that we have the general area correct, and we're gonna look for anything. I've done that before myself, and that's what's taught me, and to be more of trying to stick with just a poem to narrow down my correct general area. But it doesn't mean that. Again, I believe the hints are so subjective. We can all point them to just about anywhere within the Rocky Mountains and try and figure it out. But so, Alan, I'll let you defend yourself to Silver Fox on that one.
Well, I think my first answer was it's fun. That's why I'm going down these rabbit hole hints. But Forrest has also said there are hints in the book or hints in his book that will help you with the clues in the poem. And he said one hint will instigate a thought that might help you with a clue. So it's not just, and I'm the anti-poem purist or anti-book purist. I mean, I've got Hemingway's book written by someone that no one's ever heard of. If I go down the furthest rabbit holes, I think K-Pro calls me Kitchen Sink Kelly. So I take it all, but I'm waiting for that one hint that sparks something that clicks with a clue, one of those major clues.
Sure.
And even the 9 clues, we don't know what they are. Is the 9th clue blaze, or is the 9th clue in the wood? You don't even know that. So you can't just base yourself off the poem and the clues, because that's what we've been doing for a decade, and no one has a chest. So I share these stories and these thoughts, and I go down these rabbit holes because, one, it's fun, and two, because nothing else is working, to be honest.
Well, there's and you can't say that any one method is wrong. And it really doesn't matter when we get to the end of this, whether Alan, Kitchen Sink Alan, as I guess he's called, finds it, or poem purist, evil Dodson here finds it. It really doesn't matter what methodology we use. It only matters that we found it. So there could be more than one way to skin a cat, more than one way to figure this thing out, whether that is, figuring out what the subtle hints are and being able to lead you to the correct general area, or just deriving it from the poem itself. There could be more than one way of figuring this thing out. Which way is easier? Which way is more direct? I'm sure that's completely debatable amongst the whole community.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, people solved the first 2 clues and didn't know they were there. People may have solved the first 4 and didn't. He doesn't even know if they solved the first 4. So there's no confirmations along the way. No one knows if they solved 1 or 7 or 9. He's only giving you these proximities, which maybe are vague, and who knows? So
he's having a hell of a lot of fun, isn't he?
Yep.
Evil bastard. Cheers, Forrest, if you're watching.
Cheers.
All right, let me see make sure we got anything else. Cynthia, do you have anything to add to that about running down these rabbit holes? I mean, I get it. I've had debates with other people. I love going down these rabbit holes. But go ahead, Cynthia.
I've been down many a rabbit hole. Yes, I love rabbits.
Sure.
I've upgraded to a 7%er now, so I'm in trouble now.
Right. Don't stay within the 7. We're all 7%ers. The other 93% just don't know how to have fun like we do. I think we're all caught up on the questions. I'm getting down here towards the end. So any last things you want to wrap up, Kelly? This is your show. So
I just hope Jason Dent's still here.
I think he's still around. He's
punishing him. You're watching this.
Punishing him. He's making up for the 2 hours of you watching him unwrap pennies. So
to be honest, my wrap up is that I have no idea where the treasure chest is. No one does. Like, I'm not trying to tell people it's in Yellowstone. I'm just saying these are the reasons why I think it's in Yellowstone. And
sure.
If it's found in New Mexico tomorrow, I'm going to be happy. I won't be shocked. If it's found in Colorado by someone, same thing. I am sold on Yellowstone, one, because it's awesome there. And so I'm okay spending the money to go visit there from California. I don't live close to any of these states. So I enjoy myself. And like I said, it's all about contentment. And I'm enjoying myself right now.
Yep, absolutely. Cynthia, you got anything?
I do not.
I do not.
It was a good show.
I do not.
It is. No, it was a lot of fun.
Alan, you did a great job with your presentations, and you had your quotes and the sources. So no, this was an excellent show.
Yep. You did an amazing job, Alan, really putting all your thoughts. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, as any of you know in the chat room, it's so difficult to put your thoughts and all these different coincidences and all your different aberrations and everything else into a logical thought process. I mean, I give big props to Alan and even Todd Birmingham, who also has come on here and really shared his solve and everything else put together in such a legible, linear fashion to walk you through their thought process. So I definitely give you props. I could never do it as well as you guys do. So I think you guys do an amazing job of doing that. And I want to thank Cynthia for coming on and sharing and coming on for Alan. Alan really wanted her to come on here. I'm always happy to have Cynthia on. I wish you would have had a big old margarita and, you know, but
if you get Dale next time.
Oh no,
Dale does it.
Well, listen, guys. Usually I say I'm out of beer, so it's time to get out of here. Well, guess what? I still got beer left, so there might be more show to come, guys. But anyways, it's been fun. It's been real. It's time to get out of here. So we will catch you all on the flip side. Have a good night, guys.
Cheers, y'all.
Oh, wait, I always forget. At the end of the show, we'd like to ask you, if you like this show, give it a like. Not just because you like the 3 people that are in here, but you actually like what we talked about. Because I don't care if YouTube or anybody else, your PTA or your friends or your neighbors or anybody else likes it. I care if you people in the chat room like this. Those people that are watching on a replay like it. That's what we care about. So if you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, that's okay. There's another button for you. No hard feelings, guys. So have a great night, and maybe, wink, wink, stick around. There may be more to come. We'll catch you all on the flip side. Good night, guys.